Hello and welcome. I'm James Azimoha. Here are headlines. The 10th night of strikes between the US and Iran as Trump warns of retaliation for troops killed. Azerbaijan's leader signs 2 declarations aimed at deepening ties on his trip to Germany. And the UK's new leader assembles his top team in Downing Street, pledging to tackle the rising cost of living. The US has warned of retaliation for the death of troops serving in the conflict with Iran after a 10th night of strikes. Iran says it's hit US military sites in Kuwait and Bahrain, along with 2 oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz. Here's more.
The United States has carried out a 10th consecutive night of airstrikes on Iran, with the latest 5-hour operation ending late on Monday. US Central Command said in a post on X that the latest strikes had hit Iranian military command centers, maritime capabilities, missile and drone launch sites, and air defense systems. Washington says the campaign is aimed at reducing Iran's ability to threaten commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. The latest attacks come after President Donald Trump vowed to retaliate following the deaths of 3 US soldiers, 2 in Jordan and 1 in Iraq. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations Agency says a tanker in the Strait of Hormuz has been struck by an unidentified projectile, forcing its crew to abandon the vessel. The UKMTO says the incident occurred 8 nautical miles northeast of Lima, Oman, and is under investigation. Separately, Iran's Revolutionary Guards say that 2 oil tankers had caught fire after explosions while attempting to transit the southern route of the strait. The guards say rescue teams were removing the crews from the area, but did not identify the vessels. Reuters could not independently verify the guards' statement or whether the 2 incidents were connected. Meanwhile, the IRGC say they've targeted US military facilities in Kuwait on Tuesday. During the night, Jordan said its air defenses intercepted 3 Iranian missiles with no casualties or damage reported, and Bahrain said it also destroyed multiple aerial threats. Earlier in the day, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian declared what he described as a full-scale war with the United States. However, Iran's foreign ministry also said it had received mediation proposals and the diplomatic channels remain open.
Now to Yemen, where the Saudi-backed government says it will resume oil exports to fund salaries, public services, and stabilize the economy.
In line with our responsibility to ease suffering, we announce that we will work on resuming oil exports by all means starting today and direct the revenues to serve the Yemeni people everywhere. Our priorities include meeting the state's basic obligations, paying salaries, improving services and supporting economic stability, ensuring that Yemen's wealth returns to all Yemenis instead of remaining hostage to the militia's recklessness and extortion. I would also like to remind you that the government has, over the past period, been committed to exercising the highest degree of restraint after the militia's targeted oil facilities.
Now, the Saudi-led coalition has vowed to protect commercial shipping in the Bab al-Mandab Strait after Yemen's Houthis announced a ban on its vessels. A coalition spokesperson said all necessary measures will be taken to safeguard ships using the strategic waterway and will respond to any threats. He called the Houthi ban an escalation, saying more than 300 commercial vessels reached Houthi-controlled ports with food and fuel during the first half of the year. The Iran-backed group says the ban was in response to what it describes as nearly 12 years of Saudi restrictions. Now to Ukraine and Russia, where both sides are trading accusations after another wave of deadly drone attacks. 2 people have been killed and 9 injured in Zaporizhzhia after a night of Russian strikes across the country.
In Ukraine's northeastern city of Sumy, a fire engulfed an epicenter hardware store, with Ukrainian officials blaming a Russian drone attack. Ukraine's state emergency service said a separate Russian airstrike in the eastern city hit a 9-story apartment building, injuring 6 people. Search and rescue teams were seen evacuating residents from the damaged building. Regional authorities said emergency operations were complicated by repeated strikes and the continued presence of Russian drones over the area, creating an ongoing threat for rescue crews. The latest attacks come after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Kiev had struck Russian logistical facilities and an oil depot in the Moscow region. Meanwhile, Russia accused Ukraine of carrying out a drone attack on a bus in the Belgorod region, saying 5 civilians, including a minor, were killed and 23 others were injured. Regional officials said 3 of the wounded remain in critical condition. Ukraine did not immediately comment on the claim. Separately, fires broke out overnight at industrial facilities in the western Russian city of Lipetsk, amid unconfirmed reports of another attack.
Now, as speculation grows over Ukraine's military leadership, Kyiv is intensifying its long-range attacks on Russia. Join us to unpack this. From Chicago is Maria Dmitriev-Kapeniuk, president of the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America's Illinois Division. Good to have you, Maria.
Thank you for having me.
Now, what do you make of reports that Ukraine's president may replace his military chief?
Ukraine is a democracy, and debates are healthy debates. And Ukraine has democratically elected president, and people either support or protest. And as opposed to Russia, people do have a right to protest, express their opinions. Those are peaceful protests, and leaders do listen to it. As we've seen before, was the protest against the cutting down a corruption agency. People feel empowered to be involved in the decision making. What is going to come out of it? I'm absolutely confident that it's going to strengthen Ukraine and stronger voices, and the decisions that are being made are all towards bringing Ukraine to victory.
Now, in your opinion, would changing the commander-in-chief now strengthen the war effort or create new or more instability?
I don't believe it's going to be a radical change. It's all about timing. In the very beginning of the full-scale invasion, Ukraine had what we called a small post-Soviet army. And that small post-Soviet army was fighting a large post-Soviet Russian army. So commanders like Syrsky and even Zaluzhny, they had experience, they were trained on that kind of battlefield. A lot has changed in 5 years. As you see, Ukraine is actually leading in the military technology, and that all evolved because of the younger, more technologically savvy engineers and inventions, right? Necessity is the mother of inventions. I've been to Ukraine myself. I've talked to people that are heading the startups. They're testing their innovations directly with the commanders. Ukraine doesn't have as much of the centralized supply chain as opposed to Russia. So Fedorov kind of realized that and took it to the very next level and scaled it up. And that's why we see results that we see. So there is place for, there's still place for both kind of approaches, and then people are feeling strongly about Fedorov, and rightfully so. And what's going to come out of it, we're going to see. But I do trust the people of Ukraine. I do trust the leaders that people have elected and continue to trust. And people underestimated, or the world underestimated the power of the people of Ukraine that are still protecting their territory, their rights to democracy. And I'm confident that the right decisions are going to come out of this debate.
Mm-hmm. Now, what do the reported disagreements tell us about the pressure inside Ukraine's leadership?
The pressure is there, but it is a healthy pressure again. It is a society pressure. And as I imagine living in Ukraine, right? All day you have to work, you have to support your family, your kids go to school. You got attacks daily, as you just reported, on the cities. And people still find time to come to the streets where it's actually not that safe and protest. So that tells you about the spirit and the pressure that is being put on the leadership to make right decisions. And yet, Ukrainian leadership has made a lot of tough decisions over this past 5 years, and it's not a stranger to working under pressure. So we are hoping that it is going to be the right decision and the right amount of pressure.
All right. Now, how might another senior military reshuffle affect the mood on the front line?
As someone that's communicating with the frontline friends, and they know what they're doing, meaning that people at the front lines, not much is going to change right away because they're holding the line and they're holding the line steady. And as I mentioned, a lot of supplies that are coming to front lines are from the asymmetrical supply chain, not necessarily from the government. So the changes are not going to be any immediate. Of course, everyone has an opinion how it should be handled, but again, ultimately, it's up to the leadership to make those decisions. And the only goal that Ukraine has right now is the victory. And whoever is most effective and deemed to bring Ukraine to this victory leadership to the end of the war is probably going to go forward. And I'm sure that as long as the decision is fair, the frontline commanders, the frontline troops are going to go along with it.
Mm-hmm. Now, Ukraine is stepping up attacks on Russian energy sites. What is it trying to achieve here?
It is pretty obvious that Ukraine has been under these attacks, and especially the past year, they intensified tremendously. If you remember the freezing winter where Ukrainian people were suffering from the destroyed infrastructure. And so some of it is being bounced back to Russia right now. The targets that are being hit are all legitimate targets. They are oil depot, and we know the oil industry is fueling Russian and attacks against Ukraine. And since Russia is failing in the fire field, they are intensifying attacks on civilians, as opposed to Ukraine is hitting the military targets, the oil targets. I know there was an attack on the Amazon facility, and we know that there are reports that they supply, through that supply chain, come chips that are used in building drones. So it's all legitimate targets. And really the hope is that the people of Russia will see what the war really feels like, and the war was started by their leadership. Maybe they will take to the streets eventually, seeing that actually, we were going to defeat Ukrainians, so we're going to protect our country from so-called imaginary enemy, and now we're being attacked. So maybe someone will reconsider and use the hour to protest and to change the leadership. There is hope.
Mm-hmm. Now, more than 400 drones were reportedly launched towards Moscow. How significant is that?
It is just the strength is in numbers that just says that Ukraine is way better off these days with the technology. We call it long-range sanctions that the world has failed to deliver effectively. So Ukraine is using the technology that they have to strike the oil facilities. And then the power of the amount of the drones that are being delivered precisely, because of course it's all about precision and the distance, is showing the world how effective Ukrainians are in their strategy, in their military strategy. not only in a battlefield and the kill zone, so-called, where the actual war is, but also in having a strategy in targeting Russia's facilities and having a technology that probably no one else in the world has. So those are all Ukrainian cards that we're not just talking about it, we're showing how it's done.
Now, finally, Maria, how are Ukrainian Americans viewing this intensified campaign inside Russia?
It is positive, of course, and we are cheering for every target being struck, as hopefully it's going to bring Russia eventually to the negotiating table. And it's also showing American leadership that Russia doesn't really care about their own people, not only dying by thousands daily at the front line, but also being empowered, living in poverty, not having enough gas. We're hearing reports that there are shortages of gas throughout Russia, and of course there are smoke and fire from those strikes, and yet Putin refuses to end this war, because Putin is ultimately the only person that could end this war. And American leadership hopefully is getting more and more signals that they have to be stronger, that they have to really use the strength against Russia that they have. Even the sanctions that are being talked about, that there should be a bill coming through the U.S. Congress soon to reinforce the sweeping sanctions, and hopefully that will bring Russia to the negotiating table.
Maria, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, after the break, we'll take a look at the deepening strategic and economic partnership between Azerbaijan and Germany. Stay with us.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
More than 20,000 partisan fighters have been hidden. We found only 3,000.
My grandmother had 3 brothers. In the graveyard, the body of just one of them.
Their struggle was very unequal and against a state that had defeated such a force as Nazi Germany.
A lot of resistant fighters in the beginning of Soviet occupation actually would end up here, if not killed somewhere in the woods.
She was arrested at her home. Her 7-year-old daughter ran to her and screamed, "Mom, please take me with you." This record having the names of the individuals who were placed in the list of deportations.
I was born in Kengia, in a labor camp. My mother was a partisan liaison.
The first years were extremely difficult, of course. Poverty, hunger. The temperature sometimes dropped to minus 50 degrees.
The train stations, like the one behind me, once said goodbyes to thousands of people carried from across the Baltic states toward Siberia.
Welcome back to A News. Now, the UK's new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, hosted his first cabinet meeting on Tuesday, making the cost of living the central focus of his government. On just his second day in office, Burnham announced plans to cut taxes on electricity bills one of several early measures aimed at easing pressure on households while keeping public finances under control. Addressing his ministers, he urged every department to identify ways to help bring down everyday costs, saying his government must be, in his words, a cost of living government.
We need to every day think, well, what can we do just to take that little bit of pressure off people's shoulders, just to give them that little extra sense that help is coming, so that they can have that bit of hope that things are getting better. And that's the mission that we've got to set ourselves together. And later in the discussion, I think it would be great to hear from all of you in terms of what your department can do around cost of living, because there are things that can be done, big and small, and it would be just really good to have that discussion. We need to be a cost of living government.
Now, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney said he will intensify trade talks with Washington after the White House announced 50% tariffs on a wide range of Canadian imports. The new regime is due to begin next month.
Canada's wine, hockey sticks and cement, among other things, are set to be charged 50% in tariffs when being sent to the US next month. However, key exports such as energy, critical minerals and fish will be exempt from the increase. The United States has imposed fresh tax hikes on nearly $20 billion worth of Canadian imports. President Donald Trump says the reason is that Canada is discriminating against US exports on American cars, alcohol and dairy products. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says Ottawa was ready to intensify trade talks with Washington in the coming weeks. However, he accused Washington of repeatedly violating the North American Trade Agreement and referred to what he called threats to Canadian sovereignty. Trump invoked Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930, which protects against goods discrimination. This law hasn't been used in more than a century. The measures are due to take effect in 30 days and will apply even to goods covered by the existing US-Mexico-Canada trade agreement.
Now, Canada and Pakistan are resetting relations after their first foreign ministerial visit in nearly 2 decades. Miriam Zia reports from Islamabad.
Canadian Foreign Minister Anita Anand wrapped up a one-day visit to Islamabad on Monday, the first by a Canadian Foreign Minister to Pakistan in nearly 20 years. She held talks with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, Deputy Prime Minister Ishaq Dar, and Chief of Army Staff Field Marshal Asim Munir, as both countries looked to expand ties beyond their long-standing people-to-people links. The two sides agreed to accelerate negotiations on a foreign investment promotion and protection agreement and revive a bilateral trade and investment working group. Discussions also covered investment in critical minerals, renewable energy, and closer security cooperation. Canada announced more than $47 million in new assistance, including over $2.2 million for 3 security projects covering border management, counterterrorism, and financial crime investigations. The remaining funding will support climate resilience, girls' education, health, and flood recovery. The visit comes as Canada looks to diversify its global trade partnerships, while Pakistan seeks greater foreign investment and stronger economic ties with Western partners. Mariam Zia, A News, Islamabad.
Now, Southeast Asian foreign ministers have expressed grave concern over the US-Iran conflict at a meeting in the Philippines. Senior officials from the US, China, and Russia are attending the talks, which will also focus on regional issues, including ending the civil war in Myanmar. Laura Westbrook reports from Hong Kong.
The Association of Southeast Asian Nations foreign ministers issued a statement expressing deep concerns over renewed fighting between the US and Iran, and they also renewed calls for the full reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Many countries in Southeast Asia have been heavily impacted by the conflict as they are big importers of oil and gas from the Middle East. The foreign ministers from ASEAN are also joined by US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and experts say they'll be watching for what reassurances, if any, the US diplomat will make the bloc. China's top diplomat Wang Yi and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will also be in attendance. The Philippines declared a national energy emergency in March. It has turned to Russia for oil to help shore up its supplies. The bloc is expected to discuss whether to readmit Myanmar's military rulers to its high-level meetings for the first time since they overthrew the democratically elected government and seized power in 2021. But ASEAN remains divided on how to deal with Myanmar. Thailand is pushing for Myanmar's reintegration. Other member states, though, aren't happy with the lack of progress on the bloc's long-stalled five-point peace plan. Malaysian Foreign Minister Mohammed Hassan said in May that he opposed high-level talks while oppression is still taking place. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said he was open to the possibility of sideline meetings with both Lavrov and Wang Yi, but tensions remain over the South China Sea. Before the meeting, Philippine and Chinese sailors clashed at the Second Thomas Shoal. China claims almost all the South China Sea, but there are competing claims from other countries, including the Philippines. The United States condemned what it calls dangerous Chinese actions in the contested waterway. Meanwhile, China's foreign ministry says it had summoned the Philippine ambassador to lodge what it calls solemn representations over the clash. Laura Westbrook for A News in Hong Kong.
Meanwhile, the United States has condemned what it calls China's dangerous and aggressive actions against Philippine Navy personnel in the South China Sea. The State Department urged Beijing to stop what it called destabilizing conduct near Second Thomas Shoal. The warning followed a new confrontation between China and the Philippines in the disputed waters. Manila said one Navy personnel was injured, while Beijing accused Philippine boats of ramming a Chinese Coast Guard vessel. China rejected the criticism and said it would continue operations in the area. Hungarian Prime Minister Peter Magyar has issued a public apology after his hasty presidential nomination collapsed. Chess legend Judith Polgar rejected the offer just a day after it was announced, refusing to take on the burden of a divided nation. Facing intense political blowback, Magyar took full responsibility.
I am sorry if my enthusiasm, which stemmed from my joy and unconditional trust, led to communication errors that may have contributed to the situation that has arisen and to her decision. I bear sole responsibility for this. My fellow citizens, in recent days, many opinions and much criticism has been voiced regarding the process of nominating a head of state. While acknowledging that the process did not unfold in every respect as many would have considered proper or ideal, I would like to emphasize once again that there will never be a process so perfect that it is supported by everyone. But just as we have done so far, we will continue to learn from our mistakes and experiences.
Now, Azerbaijan and Germany are deepening ties with a new focus on energy, trade and investment. During talks in Berlin, President Ilham Aliyev and Chancellor Friedrich Merz agreed to establish a bilateral economic council and discussed expanding cooperation on gas supplies, hydrogen and transport connectivity. Both leaders highlighted the growing strategic partnership with energy security taking center stage.
I am very glad that the relations between our countries are developing dynamically. Today, with the signing of a joint declaration, we are laying a foundation stone for the expansion of our relations. At the same time today, the establishment of a German-Azerbaijani Economic Council is being agreed upon. This is an important signal to companies in both countries.
Einen Grundstein für die Ausbau unserer Beziehungen. Zugleich wird heute, und Sie sind
Last year, our trade turnover with Germany stood at approximately $1.5 billion. Crude oil accounts for the main part of our exports. Azerbaijan is capable of supplying oil in the required volumes. this can be carried out both through domestic sources and through the trading arm of our energy company, SOKHA. In other words, there are no issues here.
Azerbaijan and Germany have signed 2 declarations aimed at deepening political and economic cooperation. Joining us to discuss this is political analyst Okan Nabiye. Good to have you, Okan.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for hosting me.
Now, how significant are these agreements for relations between Azerbaijan and Germany?
It's a very significant, actually, because it's a first time for a long year the Azerbaijani leaders and a German leader met together. We remember the last time it was a meeting between German Chancellor Angela Merkel and President Ilham Aliyev. There was big steps towards the political and economic cooperation between Germany and Azerbaijan, but for years this economic and political cooperation decreased. Now we see that European Union, considering the situation between Russia and Ukraine, the Eastern Europe, and considering the situation in the Middle East, European Union needs Azerbaijan and the South Caucasus, and Azerbaijan one of the main countries that can put its assets to this cooperation. Now Germany coming back to this meeting and coming back to this cooperation between Germany and Azerbaijan.
Now, energy has dominated the relations for years. Where could cooperation expand to next?
Actually, you're right. Now is energy, and as President of Azerbaijan said that he's declared that the mainly Germany buying Azerbaijani crude oil, and it's a main part of the Azerbaijani export to Germany. But from this year, Azerbaijan started exporting natural gas to Austria and South Germany, and Azerbaijan has a potential to export more. So in the upcoming month, in the upcoming years, we are waiting for a more exportation of the Azerbaijani gas to Germany, and there's a big potential for that. And Germany is one of the premium countries that buys Azerbaijani gas for a high cost or for a high price.
They've also created a joint business council. Will that bring more German investment into Azerbaijan?
So it will bring more German investment to Azerbaijan, not only to the oil and gas sector. It can bring investment to the machinery sphere in Azerbaijan. It can bring to chemical engineering sector in Azerbaijan. And we know that the Sumqayit Technological Park is one of the main interests of the German investment. At the same time, it could also bring investment to the mining of Azerbaijan. As we know that in the liberated territories, there's a big potential for mining, and Germany can also invest big monies to the mining in Azerbaijan. It's a good tradition that the first mining investment to Azerbaijan started as Siemens company. Now it could be in the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, and it could be good continuing of this tradition.
Now, Germany wants alternative routes into Asia. How important is Azerbaijan to that strategy?
It's absolutely important and very active problem for the European Union, not only for Germany. It's for the most European countries nowadays. And one of the routes the German can export it. It's mainly concentrated across the Mediterranean through the Balkan countries, but considering there's a big problem in the Hormuz, the Red Sea region, there's the only way that Europe can export its goods to the Asian market. At the same time, can get import goods from the China and from the resources from the Central Asia. It's only through the Caucasus. And as we know, there's from the European side, there's two entrances to the South Caucasus. It's from Georgia and from Armenia. And there's only one way to the Central Asia. It's from Baku, from the Alat port. So Azerbaijan is a core stone for the Central Corridor. Azerbaijan is a core stone, the main stone for Trans-Caspian trade. So now the importance of Azerbaijan for Europeans, especially for Germany, is increasing day by day.
Now, regional peace was also part of their discussions. What can Berlin realistically bring to the process?
Actually, and mainly there's, apart from the political support and support in the European Union, as we know that in the European Union, in the European Parliament, in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, there is many voices that can play a disruptive role in the peace negotiations and the peace process between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Germany can decrease these voices. In the European Parliament, Germany can decrease these voices. In the Parliamentary Assembly or Council of Europe, as we know, the one of this member of Parliament, Alexander Starr, from the Social Democratic Party, is one of the persons who was a very disruptive role against the Azerbaijani delegation and Azerbaijan in the Council of Europe. That's why there was elections that they took out the Azerbaijani right to vote in the Council of Europe. Germany can play the constructive role that Azerbaijan can come back to the Council of Europe. At the same time, Germany can support the civil society with meeting civil society and institutional peace building between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which is Germany used to play before the Second Karabakh War, and Germany can take this role back, and the German foundations can also support civil society and Azerbaijan and Armenia peace efforts.
All right. Now, finally, Orhan, could this partnership help improve Azerbaijan's wider relationship with the European Union?
We know that there's two main countries in the European Union that documented the dominant countries in the European Union. Despite that, there's a consensus issues in the European Union, but one of them is Germany. Germany is a leading economy of the European Union. Germany is the most populated country in the European Union. Germany is a third country in the world by the economic growth and economic development. Germany can make a big influence in politically, economically to the European Union that Azerbaijan relations between EU and with EU can be in the more constructive, more positive, and more optimistic for the future.
That was Orhan Nabiye, political analyst, joining us from Baku, Azerbaijan. Thank you for your time, Orhan. All right, after the break, we'll take a look at the Black Sea missile strike that killed 4 Indian crew members. Stay with us.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back to A News. Now, the death toll from flash floods in northeastern Afghanistan has risen to 32, with dozens still missing. Homes, shops and hostels have been destroyed.
Buildings have been swept away and hotels were destroyed after flash floods struck northeastern Afghanistan. At least 20 people have been killed in Nuristan province. That's according to the Taliban-run government, which warns the death toll could rise. Around 100 people still remain missing by Monday night. Most of the damage was reported in Parun, where rescue teams used excavators to clear the rubble and debris.
Yesterday afternoon, a severe flash flood struck Parun city. As a result, around 9 to 10 hotels were destroyed, causing extensive damage, as you can see. In addition, more than 100 of our fellow citizens lost their lives.
Residents described the flood as sudden and terrifying, saying the ground began shaking before water rushed through the area.
It was around 2:30 to 3 p.m. when the flash flood suddenly struck. We were sitting in our shop when the ground started shaking. At first, we thought it was an earthquake. Then we realized it wasn't an earthquake, it was the flood. People scattered in every direction and everyone was trying to save their own lives.
Afghanistan is most vulnerable to climate change, with some areas facing deeper drought and others exposed to heavier rainfall. Officials and experts also say deforestation in Nuristan has worsened flash flooding by reducing the soil's ability to absorb rainwater.
Staying in the region, Afghanistan and Tajikistan have held talks in Kabul focused on border-related issues and closer bilateral ties. Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
Afghanistan's Ministry of Defense says its Chief of Military Operations, Nur Rahman Nasrat, has met Tajikistan's ambassador to Afghanistan, Saadi Sharifi, here in Kabul. According to an official statement, the meeting took place at the office of the Chief of Military Operations of the Ministry of Defense General Staff. The two officials discussed a range of issues relating to the border between Afghanistan and Tajikistan. One particular concern along the frontier has been cross-border violence and the movement of armed groups and criminal networks. In November 2025, Tajikistan said an attack launched from Afghan territory killed 3 Chinese workers near the border. Weeks later, Tajik border guards reported killing 4 armed men who had crossed from Afghanistan. Although Afghan officials described the men as drug smugglers rather than militants. However, both sides stressed the importance of expanding bilateral cooperation and improving coordination between the two countries. They also underlined the need to strengthen friendly ties, maintain goodwill and continue dialogue on matters of mutual interests. The Afghan Ministry of Defense said the officials expressed confidence that bilateral coordination between Kabul and Dushanbe would be further strengthened. For now, no further information has been released about possible follow-up meetings or practical measures resulting from the discussions. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Now, India has summoned Russia's senior diplomat after 4 Indian nationals were killed in a Russian missile strike on a cargo ship leaving a Ukrainian port. New Delhi called the attack unacceptable. Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says Russia is in touch with India over the incident.
We continue our contact with the Indian partners. We explain our stance. The main point is that our armed forces strike and will continue to deliver strikes on those vessels which are involved in supplying the equipment and weapons, etc., for the purposes of the Kiev regime.
In Gaza, extreme heat is making conditions even harder for families already living in overcrowded tent camps.
temperatures of up to 40 degrees Celsius are making life even more difficult for families living in Gaza's overcrowded tent camps. Mahmoud Hijazi, who uses a wheelchair after being injured, says his family lives in a worn-out tent barely big enough for them. He says the extreme heat, insects during the day, and rats at night make daily life even harder. Because of his health condition, he says he needs a fan, but there is no electricity to run one. Many parents say the heat is taking a heavy toll on their children. Azza Al-Hatto says her tent has become like an oven, while the lack of water and sanitation has contributed to the spread of skin diseases. She says families keep moving from one place to another searching for shade as they wait for water to cool themselves and their children. The International Committee of the Red Cross says families are struggling with the heat, as well as rodents and mosquitoes, and need reliable access to clean water, sanitation, healthcare, and safe shelter. The organisation says it and other aid organisations continue supporting displaced families despite ongoing restrictions on aid deliveries and the challenges of bringing supplies safely into Gaza.
Now, Italian and Turkish defense firms have taken a major step towards pairing crewed jets with autonomous fighters in combat. Adamor reports from Istanbul.
Italian aerospace company Leonardo and Turkish defense firm Baykar have revealed new details of successful flight trials in which a crewed aircraft and an uncrewed fighter flew together in autonomous formation. The findings were presented on Monday at the Farnborough International Air Show in the UK, highlighting technological advances expected to play an increasing role in future aerial combat. The air trials were conducted in May at Baykar's test center in Çorlu using Leonardo's M346 jet and Baykar's Bayraktar Kızılelma unmanned fighter aircraft. During the tests, the Kızılelma took off autonomously before joining the M346 in mid-flight. Once airborne, pilots aboard the M346 assumed control of the unmanned aircraft using a newly developed avionics and computing system. They issued commands for a range of maneuvers, including position changes, separation, and rejoining formations, which the Kızılelma then implemented autonomously. The tests marked the program's transition from simulations to real-world flight operations following months of joint development by engineering teams in both Turkey and Italy. The two companies say data collected during the tests will now be used to stage more complex missions in which crewed and uncrewed aircraft operate in tandem to achieve common objectives. Additional flight tests of greater operational complexity are planned in the coming months. The joint tests are part of a broader strategic partnership between Baykar and Leonardo, which established the LBA Systems joint venture last year to develop and produce unmanned aerial systems. Baykar brings its expertise in advanced uncrewed platforms, while Leonardo contributes electronic technologies for crewed and uncrewed teaming and swarming operations. According to both companies, these collaborative efforts help reduce pilot workload and improve combat effectiveness, while keeping human decision-making at the heart of aerial combat missions. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Now, Georgia is turning culinary pride into national policy with a new agency dedicated to protecting and promoting its food. Nina Nikolashvili reports on Batumi.
Move over, diplomats. Georgia just gave its food a seat at the government's table. The new National Agency of Gastronomy has one real job: make sure the world never forgets who invented khinkali folding as an art form, and protect, promote, and export everything else that makes Georgian cuisine impossible to forget. Deputy Minister Lasha Avaliani is leading things for now. No small task, considering that the mandate covers geographical indications, rural development, and convincing the world that cheese bread is a legitimate meal at any hour. It's not exactly a surprise move, though. Georgians have never needed convincing about their food. Ask anyone here and they will tell you the buying came first, the hospitality came second, and everything else is just details. Even Anthony Bourdain again left Georgia, practically warning the rest of the world. Don't you dare criticize the food here. So now that pride gets a policy. Wine, bread, cheese, and centuries-old traditions protected by law, backed by strategy, and pushed onto the global stage. Because in Georgia, gastronomy was never just dinner. Its identity, its economy, and apparently now its government business too. Nini Nikolaishvili for A News, reporting from Batumi, the hometown of Acharyan Khachapuri.
Now, fuel shortages and rising prices are putting fresh pressure on drivers across Kyrgyzstan as disruptions to Russian supplies force Bishkek to look for alternatives. Fariza Kalimoziner has more.
A sharp rise in fuel prices and growing shortages at filling stations are putting new pressure on drivers across Kyrgyzstan. The price of premium EI95 gasoline has climbed to around $1.25 per liter, up from about $1 per liter just days earlier. Premium EI100 has also surged to nearly $1.70 per liter, while drivers in Bishkek and other regions report that EI95 has temporarily disappeared from some gas stations. The price surge is being driven by several factors. Kyrgyzstan relies on Russia for more than 90% of its gasoline imports. But repeated Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian oil infrastructure combined with the rising wholesale fuel prices have disrupted supplies and pushed fuel costs higher. Industry representatives also say the government's decision to ease price regulation has allowed retailers to pass those costs on to consumers. And according to the Kyrgyz Association of Oil Traders, Russian refineries are currently offering mostly diesel fuel, forcing importers to seek alternative supplies from Azerbaijan, China, Belarus, and Turkmenistan. Wholesale gasoline prices have more than doubled in recent months, rising from around $700 to $1,800 per ton. To ease the shortage, Kazakhstan has agreed to supply Kyrgyzstan with 15,000 to 20,000 tons of fuel oil every month. The fuel can be refined into gasoline and diesel or just used at thermal power plants during the upcoming heating season. Bishkek has also requested direct supplies of gasoline and diesel, but that request is still under consideration. Kazakhstan has maintained temporary restrictions on fuel exports to prioritize its domestic market, meaning fuel oil is currently the only product being supplied. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
All right, that's all we have for now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to A News.